Hello everyone, Matthias Key here, coming to you from the year 2024, reading Ancient Prophecies of the Mahdi, the Book of Revelation as prototype for the Islamic end-time Hadiths. We reached the section titled K17, the Woman of Babylon sitting on the beast at the beginning of the 7-year tribulation. Revelation. The rider on the white horse reappears in a different guise, as the beast who carries the woman of Babylon to power. She is the prostitute whom we've already encountered in section K02. She represents the spirit of empire, originally manifested in Babel, the kingdom of Nimrod. God put a sudden end to it by confusing the world's languages at the Tower of Babel. The spirit of empire came back to power in more kingdoms of the ancient world: Egypt, Assyria, Babylon, Persia, Greece, and Rome. Each of them ruled over Jerusalem at some point. They set the stage for it to be the epicenter for the future empire of the tribulation. Besides Jerusalem, the Bible also points to Rome as the other epicenter of the end times, or perhaps another city that will be its successor. We know this from Daniel's prophecies of a revived Roman Empire. His dream in Daniel chapter 2 was of a statue, the fourth part of which is as strong as iron, that crushes. In Daniel 2:40. 600 years after Daniel was added to the Old Testament, both Jews and Christians recognized his dream's fulfillment in the Roman Empire of their time. Another dream of Daniel's is of beasts, the fourth of which has great iron teeth that breaks things in pieces. Daniel 7, verse 7. But this dream details events that did not come to pass in the ancient Roman Empire, as evident from the interpretation that God gave to Daniel for the dream. Instead, the Daniel 7 passage matches up with future events prophesied in Revelation. We can see this if we reorder the verses of Daniel's dream according to Revelation's time sequence. Here is how the Daniel 7 passage matches up with Revelation's prophecies of future events. The 10 horns of the beast in Daniel matches up with the 10 horns of the beast of Revelation. Daniel's 10 horns become 10 kings. One of them subsumes 3 of the others, leaving 7 kings. This compares to the 7 heads of Revelation. Daniel's beast makes war on the saints and is apparently victorious. This compares with Revelation. Then the kingdom will be taken away and he will be judged. This compares with the final defeat of Revelation's beast. God's saints will therefore be given possession of the kingdom. This will occur in Revelation when the tribulation saints come into the millennial kingdom. The saints will possess the kingdom forever and ever. This is fulfilled when the saints enter into God's eternal kingdom. This evidence shows that Daniel 7 is describing a different Roman Empire, one that is revived during the tribulation. In Revelation, this empire will be established by the woman of Babylon, with the help of the Antichrist beast. The woman flaunts her promiscuity, fornication, and adultery. She is so proud of this that she wears name of mystery on her forehead, mother of prostitutes and of earth's abominations. She defies God by promoting sin. She seeks her security elsewhere in rampant adulteries. She avoids real work by enslaving her victims to serve her. The woman's forbidden relationship at the outset of the tribulation is with the beast. The vision paints a graphically suggestive picture of her achieving power by sitting on the beast. Through him, she renews her line of kingdoms. She's dressed as a seductress, holding a golden cup paid for by those sharing in her temptations. By her enticements, she achieves a world order at the beginning of the tribulation and establishes control over many nations, languages, and peoples. Her empire makes immorality into a virtue, sees things through a sexual prism, and brings to the masses a stupefying drunkenness that is oblivious to spiritual matters. Will the woman of Babylon be an actual woman, whom we will be able to identify by a physical description or certain personality traits? The inscription on her forehead may be her actual appearance, but the same woman was mentioned in section K02 in conjunction with the 6 empires that opposed God in the Old Testament. There was no historical female figure to speak of in them, and certainly not one who made her reappearance in each one. The position of political and cultural ruler in those empires was held by a succession of leaders. We can therefore expect that in the tribulation, the woman of Babylon is symbolic, representing one or more top leaders who will be the public face of the revived Roman Empire. Why does the vision speak of a woman of Babylon instead of Rome? Babylon was capital of the Babylonian Empire, which was conquered by the Medo-Persians in 539 BCE. The city was never significant after that. Baghdad was founded in 762 of the Common Era, 85 kilometers to the north, as the capital of the Islamic Abbasid Caliphate. The Babylon of Revelation is likely not referring to Baghdad, nor a future great city that will be rebuilt at its original location. When John received his vision, Rome was the greatest power on earth. God helped John to shield the churches who received his letter by depicting the leading figure of the future Roman Empire as the prostitute of Babylon instead of the prostitute of Rome. The use of the word Babylon also ties the tribulation to the series of anti-God empires going back to Babel. The original Roman Empire ruled over the Mediterranean Sea basin, including southern and western Europe, northern Africa, and much of the Middle East up to the borders of Persia. Roman Italy was its capital for 1,000 years. But during the 4th century, the capital of the western half was moved to Milan. In the 5th century, it shifted to Ravenna. Not long afterwards, the Western Empire fell in 476. In 330, Constantinople became capital of the Eastern Roman Empire, also known as the Byzantine Empire. This city was popularly known as the Second Rome. It remained capital until 1453, when it was conquered by Ottoman armies. At that time, the Roman Empire was finally ended. The city was renamed Istanbul and was repurposed as the capital of the Ottoman Caliphate until 1924. A revived Roman Empire will presumably cover much of the same territory. The end times capital of the future could be Rome, Brussels, Istanbul, or some other city of the region. It will be the crown jewel of the woman of Babylon, the first city of focus in the geography of the tribulation. The second will be Jerusalem. The Hadiths. The revived Roman Empire that is forecast in the Bible is also a theme in many Hadiths. They refer to the Romans as a major player in the end times. In the previous section, the Mahdi made his appearance among the Islamic army of black flags that has come from distant Khorasan to resolve the three-way civil war that had broken out among Muslims. They have marched to Jerusalem and taken possession of it. The Mahdi's jurisdiction does not yet extend across the entire world. As a step toward that end, the Mahdi and his followers make a treaty with the Romans, also known as the Byzantines. The purpose of the agreement is to suspend hostilities between the Muslims and the Romans so that they can jointly fight a common enemy. Together, they will be victorious. In the victory, the Muslim army will take booty. This is a tradition that started with Muhammad. Surah 8 of the Quran is devoted to the topic and is entitled Al-Anfal, the Spoils of War. It describes the Battle of Badr, where Muhammad's forces defeated an army of the polytheistic Quraysh tribe of Mecca at the beginning of the 6-year war between Muhammad and the tribe of his birth. After the victory, he received a revelation which has encouraged jihadists ever since to make war and plunder their defeated enemies. The Mahdi, during his 7 years of ascendancy, will use the seized property and wealth of defeated peoples to compensate his followers. We shall see, in the later section, after the overthrow of the Romans, booty will be a major engine of the world Islamic economy. One hadith says that the Muslims will make not one, but 4 treaties in succession with the Romans. The final one will be negotiated with the help of a Jewish leader descended from the Aaronic line of priests. The term of the treaty will be for 7 years. The Mahdi will be 40 years old when he makes this last treaty. Historically, Muslim nations have made many treaties with other nations, which the other party believes is a step toward lasting peace. Their example for this is Muhammad. In 628, he signed the Treaty of Hudaybiyah with the Quraysh for a period stipulated to be 10 years. The main provision of the treaty allowed his followers to enter the city and peacefully perform the Hajj. The Quraysh scrupulously held to this provision, but less than 2 years later, after a series of individual killings between the two sides, Muhammad used one such episode to accuse the Quraysh of breaking other terms of the treaty. He returned with an army and took the city of Mecca by surprise. His supporters through the centuries argue that he was justified because the Quraysh had violated the treaty. From this grew 3 Islamic doctrines. The first is Hudna, an Arabic term for a truce for a maximum of 10 years. In the book The Reliance of the Traveler, or Umdat al-Salik, the classic manual of Islamic jurisprudence composed by the 14th century Abu Dawood, a collector of hadiths, he is quoted as saying, "If Muslims are weak, a truce may be made for 10 years if necessary, for the Prophet made a truce with the Quraysh for that long." A hudna will allow the Muslim state to recover from weakness with a period of calm, allowing it to gain concessions, rearm, and eventually re-attack the enemy. It is a useful means of facilitating jihad. The second is kitman, a command to deliberately conceal one's beliefs from non-Muslims. This is practiced primarily by Shia Muslims. Jafar al-Sadiq, who ruled Shia Islam from 732 to 765 as the 6th of the 12 Imams, relayed a hadith from Muhammad that supposedly mandated kitman and commented on it. "One who exposes something from our religion is like one who intentionally kills us. You belong to a religion that whosoever conceals it, Allah will honor him, and whosoever reveals it, Allah will disgrace him." The third is taqiyya, which is to conceal belief in Islam when in imminent danger. A synonym for taqiyya would be dissimulation. This doctrine is based on Surah 16:106 of the Quran, which was precipitated by the following event recorded in Dalail al-Imama, attributed by many to al-Tabari, a 9th century Sunni scholar of early Islamic history and Quranic exegesis. The event resulted in a ruling of Muhammad, which he wrote into the Quran. The non-believers arrested Ammar ibn Yasir and tortured him until he uttered foul words about the Prophet. Anyone who, after accepting faith in Allah, utters unbelief, except under compulsion, his heart remaining firm in faith, but such an open heart their breast to unbelief, on them is wrath from Allah, and theirs will be a dreadful penalty. This verse from the Quran is used by both Shia and Sunni jihadists as justification for taqiyya. Ibn Kathir, the 14th century Sunni scholar of the Quran, memorably added, taqiyya is allowed until the day of resurrection. From this explication of Islamic doctrine, we see that Muslims are encouraged to practice deceit. In fact, they're commanded to do so given the situation. Deception is justified to gain wealth at the expense of non-Muslims, to murder the enemies of Islam, and to attain the goals of jihad. The followers of the Mahdi would understand this when he makes the treaty with the Romans, just as Hitler's Nazi followers understood when he made a treaty with his worst ideological enemy, Stalin and the Soviet Union. Hitler did this in 1939 so that he could be free to attack France and Britain. The treaty launched World War II. Less than 2 years later, he attacked the unsuspecting Russians in a surprise invasion. Muhammad, the perfect Muslim, preached hudna, kitman, and taqiyya. He demonstrated how to practice them to expand Islam's domain. But his ultimate guide in all this was the person of Allah. In the Quran, Allah refers to himself as Khayrul-Makereen. Khayrul means best of, and Makereen comes from the root makr. In an Arabic dictionary such as Al-Mawrid, makr means to deceive, delude, cheat, double-cross, or delude. Thus, Allah is boasting that He is the greatest of all deceivers. The Mahdi's treaty with the Romans will be advantageous to Islam. It will be one of hudna, kitman, and taqiyya, and it will be satisfying in the eyes of Allah, the Khayrul-Makereen. We are told that the face of the Mahdi will shine like a star. This is a direct echo of the great Jewish deliverer Moses. Whenever Moses met with God in the tabernacle and then went back to speak to his Jewish brethren, the skin of his face shined. The Mahdi's shining face will convince many that he is the awaited one, sent by Allah. At the time of the treaty agreement with the Romans and Jews and the establishment of a world government in its wake, the Mahdi and the Muslims have only partial control. A fully Islamic world order is yet to come. In the meantime, the Hadiths describe years of treachery on the part of the Ruwaybiyah. This unusual word is a diminutive of the word Rabida, meaning lowly, despicable, or worthless. People who are incapable of rising to nobility, lack integrity, and possess little more than a glimmer of religious knowledge. Despite this, they feel empowered to speak out about socio-political affairs. It is interesting that the Hadiths complain of treachery on the part of the Ruwaybidah, while applauding its use by true Muslims to further the cause of Islam. One of the tools of deception is to falsely accuse your adversary of unjust behavior that you yourself are doing. This puts them on the defensive and deflects attention from your actions. Islam justifies this kind of mirror accusation with taqiyya. The leftists of my time condone the same practice. A maxim they will sometimes admit to is, Accuse your enemy of what you're doing as you are doing it to create confusion. The above quote has been attributed to Karl Marx, Vladimir Lenin, and Saul Alinsky. Regardless of its origin, mirror accusation is a preferred tool for leftists. The Hadiths predict it will be a tool still of the Romans or the Ruwaybidah, who make the end-time treaty with the Mahdi. Perhaps these Romans will be intellectual descendants of the leftists of my day. All during the truce, the Muslims are warned to be on guard against the Romans, who have their own powerful military. The Hadith says they will soon summon one another to attack. This indicates that the truce will be tense on the Roman side as well, with their army always prepared to launch a preemptive assault. Another Hadith says, there will come a test, which is pleasant, produced by a man from the people of my house. This is a warning to beware Muslims who are co-opted by the Romans. Then there will be the little black trial, whose details are not spelled out, but which will tempt the Muslims to be double-minded, to act like a believer in the morning and an infidel in the evening. It will split them into two camps, the camp of faith, which will contain no hypocrisy, and the camp of hypocrisy, which will contain no faith. These warnings will come to pass in the next 3 sections. They will be connected with the appearance of the great enemy of the Mahdi, the Dajjal, who in Muslim eyes will be the Antichrist. When they start to happen, expect the Antichrist, the Dajjal, that day or the next. Comparison. The Romans of the end-time Hadiths and Revelation's woman of Babylon both represent a revived Roman Empire. The Christian influence on the original Roman Empire and the surrounding areas remained strong for almost 2,000 years. The resulting Western civilization slowly matured to encompass all of Europe and the Americas. In the past 300 years, Asia and Africa also came under its sway. One of the defining truths of Western civilization is the notion that there is such a thing as absolute truth. Universally valid truth is a product of the faithfulness of God, as evidenced by His integrity in the events of the Bible, and in the cohesiveness and internal agreement between all books of the Old and New Testament, whose writing He inspired over a period of 1,500 years. God then sent His Son, Jesus Christ, into the world to be the embodiment of absolute truth. John 14:6. Jesus said to him, I am the way, and the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. Unlike the taqiyya practiced by followers of Muhammad, or the disinformation and propaganda leveraged by Marx and his leftist descendants, Jesus told his followers never to hide their beliefs. In the 20th century, Europe and then North America dispensed with the Christian practices of their ancestors, which were based on the teachings and example of Jesus. Instead, Western civilization moved into a post-Christian age. Cultural and political elites dismantled much of the Judeo-Christian foundation. The various Protestant churches and the Roman Catholic Church lost their relevance in the culture. Western society dispensed with the Bible and its principles for living. In the place of the church, a politically correct and false religion has become dominant in Europe and the West. To replace God's 10 Commandments, an alternate set of commandments has arisen in the form of thousands of regulations administered by a deep state of unelected bureaucrats and promoted in all forms of media. They could be boiled down to anti-commandments, which reward the following behaviors: celebration of self and idolization of celebrity, abortion, the murder of the unborn, adultery and sexual deviancy, lying, often in the guise of disinformation, done in the service of progress. Compare this with taqiyya in Islam. Stealing, euphemistically called redistribution of wealth, from people who produce to privileged ones who take. These behaviors are grievous sins against God. They go directly against His will for our lives as expressed in His commandments and His written word, the Bible. They're deserving of His wrath. But a majority of people are currently devoted to feeding this culture and enforcing conformity to this system. Personal freedom is sacrificed to the collective will. Anyone who has a personal relationship with Jesus Christ and who follows Him as a disciple is considered a threat to society. The modern Europe of my time is no longer a set of nation-states of Christian heritage distinguished by different languages and national pride. Instead, it has become a polyglot Babylon with migrants from the whole world. There are some leftover descendants that trace their roots to historic churches of centuries past, but most distance themselves from the identity of their ancestors and have drifted a long way from being true to God's biblical standards of righteousness. Long ago, they committed spiritual adultery by diluting any biblical thinking with pure humanism, and they persist in it. Europe and the West have forsaken its Christian underpinning by indulging in moral decay. They are cementing in place the values of the coming woman of Babylon. The post-Christian West also proclaims that it is against Islamophobia. By this they wish to show solidarity with Muslims. To emphasize this, they marginalize Bible believers, accuse them of hate against Muslims, and justify the persecution of Christians and Jews. The narrative of anti-Islamophobia is bringing about a leftist Islamic alliance in my time. This is happening even before the rapture, when still present are some believers true to God who remain in the church. But most of the Western church has compromised its testimony in the attempt to avoid offending popular notions of globalism and Islam. Other Christians have withdrawn from interaction with the outside world and no longer try to be God's instruments of common grace to unbelievers. They are not the salt and light to the world that God intended them to be. The church in less affluent countries is holding out somewhat longer. As you can see, the foundations are already being built that could transition into the revived Roman Empire of Revelation, or the Hadiths. Revelation's alliance between the beast and the woman of Babylon, or the Hadith's armistice between the Mahdi and the Romans, could grow out of this unspoken leftist Islamic alliance. For both sides, the ultimate stumbling block is Jesus Christ, the Son of God, who died on the cross as a substitute for repentant sinners. They see those who trust in Jesus as their great obstacle toward establishing a new world order. If the rapture and tribulation happen soon, the current alliance may be formalized in a treaty between the Mahdi, who is the beast or Islamic Antichrist, and the woman of Babylon, who symbolizes Europe and the post-Christian West. Both are determined to bring uniformity to the world. Muslims would advocate universal Sharia law to achieve this. The West would instead enforce the spread of permissive culture. The Hadiths predict a final treaty between the Mahdi and the Romans for a term of 7 years. Through it, the leftist Islamic alliance could proclaim a lasting peace to the Middle East, unequaled in history. The treaty will be mediated by no less than a blood descendant of the Jewish priestly line of Aaron, the brother of Moses. The credit for the treaty will belong to the prince who is to come of Daniel. In the previous section, we saw that this prince who makes the treaty will be the Antichrist, known as the beast in Revelation. In the Hadiths, he will be the Mahdi. In the next section, it will mention a rebuilt temple in Jerusalem at the time of the treaty. The Jews will only have control over its inner portion. This would be one of the treaty's provisions. To make such a definitive treaty, the Antichrist or the Mahdi would indeed need the reputation of being moderate and trusted by most of the world. Israel will then rely on the sworn pledges. The Jews inhabiting Israel at that time will overlook the lessons of the Jews from my day, who are being repeatedly threatened with extermination by Islamists who wish to speed the coming of the Mahdi. But we shall see that after the Jews allow this treaty, God will lift their spiritual blindness. This unprecedented treaty will probably be what convinces all the nations to swear allegiance to the leftist Islamic alliance and come under the jurisdiction of a single world order. The world would fall to the grand deception of the woman adulteress and the Mahdi, the champion of Allah, Khayrul-Makereen, the greatest of all deceivers. Operating behind the scenes is Satan, the one whom Jesus described as the ultimate deceiver. In the Hadiths, the treaty with the Romans will be used to turn against a common enemy that does not recognize the New World Order. Some Sunni commentators guess that the enemy will be Shias, and Shia commentators that it will be Sunnis. Other Muslim commentators speculate that it will be Russia. This would make more sense since the Romans or Europeans have been wary of Russia for centuries. Moreover, many Muslims wish for Constantinople to be reestablished as the capital of the world caliphate, and the Russians instead want to usurp the role of Constantinople in history by replacing it with Moscow, the third Rome. Or the common enemy could be pockets of resistance among the nations who will not submit to the world order. In the Bible's end-time accounts, there are two situations involving an unusual alliance facing a common enemy. The first is a Russian-Muslim alliance against Israel, pictured by many Christian commentators in the invasion of Israel from the north, described in Ezekiel 38 and 39. That event will likely happen after the rapture, but before the tribulation. The invasion is defeated by God's supernatural intervention. The second situation is here in Revelation. The common enemy of the beast and the woman of Babylon, whom they will target for destruction, includes those who put their trust in Jesus. The set of values promoted in the West of my time and by the future woman of Babylon includes the irrelevance of any divine being in the things of this world. This premise is blind to the fact that Muslims do not agree with this at all, in fact violently so. They believe that all things in the world only happen by the will of Allah. Muslims also disagree with some of the leftist anti-commandments, such as those regarding abortion or sexual deviancy. They feel a hidden resentment that they are being leveraged to further a godless agenda. Their Marxist globalist allies of convenience are truly Rawabida in their eyes, lacking integrity, relying on rhetoric instead of any future true religious basis, brazen in their declarations of how to build a just and perfect world. If this situation extends into the tribulation, the result may well be a sudden breaking of the alliance, the overthrow of the woman of Babylon by the beast, or the unexpected conquering of the Romans by the Mahdi's armies. Such a prophecy is in encompassing sections of our timeline. The Antichrist, the master of intrigue, will show his true colors. Daniel 11:22 and following. Even the prince of the covenant, and from the time that an alliance is made with him, he shall act deceitfully, and he shall become strong with a small people. Without warning, he shall come into the richest parts of the province, and he shall do what neither his fathers nor his fathers' fathers have done, scattering among them plunder, spoil, and goods. He shall devise plans against strongholds, but only for a time. If you have found this video helpful, then please click the like button. I also invite you to subscribe to this channel and click the bell icon to get notifications when I upload new videos. Thank you for watching.